For New York Times bestselling author David Robleski, a bond formed early in childhood would go on to provide endless inspiration later in life.
My first memory, very first memory, is of a dog. I was maybe 2, 3 years old, and I'm backwards looking over the back of the couch. Our collie, Princess, was next to me, and we are together as a unit. And that's just always been my experience with every dog I've owned, of course. You become not two entities, but one. One of the things that fascinates me about the connection between people and dogs is that it's absolutely ancient. It goes back tens of thousands of years.
David would eventually go on to write prolific stories centered around the connection between humans and dogs. But before he began his writing career, he worked as a software developer, a vocation he says taught him to become a better writer.
The thing that's true about the software world is that there's this long tradition of high craft, of real craftsmanship being applied to language. It's not natural language, it's not human language. It turned out to be a great training ground for understanding the amount of patience and attention and focus that it takes to make something out of language.
It was while working as a software developer that David decided to write a book called The Story of Edgar Saultel, which some of you may remember was named an Oprah's Book Club pick back in 2008.
The reason I wrote that first book, I suddenly had an idea for an actual novel. I was literally working in my backyard, and in the course of about a minute or two, the entire structure of The Story of Edgar Saultel sort of happened inside me.
The story of Edgar Saultel takes place in David's home state of Wisconsin, and it is a tale that centers around a young boy who has a deeply poetic relationship with the extraordinary dogs his family breeds. Now David is releasing his second book, Familiaris. It is a stirring origin story of the Saultel family, and as with his first book, David borrowed a good amount of the inspiration from his own childhood.
The main aspect from my life that's present in the book is the place. Wisconsin shaped me. We were out in a very remote area, and it makes you pay attention to the natural world. And it was just us and the dogs. That was an advantage to me as a writer. I can imagine a small world. I can handle a small world. Writing about the farm, writing about what it's like to live in that space, the frustrations of it, the joys of it, really, that came very naturally. The idea when I was writing The Story of Edgar Saultel, and that gets carried over into Familiaris, is that I wanted to take the farm, the little farm where I grew up, evacuate all the real people who were there, and put in all new people to play out a story. And the difference being that The Story of Edgar Saultel took place about when I was that age in that place. In Familiaris, it's the generation before and how they came to that place in the first place, before I was even done writing The Story of Edgar Saultel. What happened was, there was this character, John Saultel, Edgar's grandfather, who kept wanting to enter the story. I don't know how to describe it any other way. There would be an offhand reference to him, and I would be writing along, and suddenly there'd be an anecdote about him, and suddenly that anecdote would start expanding into something even bigger. The way I think of it is I made a deal with John, which is if you're still interesting when this book is done, you can have your own book. But on this book, you have to stay in the background. It was just great fun to finally let him loose and let him do whatever he wanted to do and say whatever he wanted to say.
With Familiaris, John is finally getting his story. As for what David hopes you get from his new book, he says he has only one wish.
Great adventure for a reader. To me, that's the highest quality that a novel can have, is to give you a parallel life that you live for days or weeks, where you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about the things that you have to do in one world, and you're worrying about what's happening in this other world. And so you live these two lives. I think that's the magic of a novel. I don't know of another art form that can do that.
Familiaris is an epic novel that examines the dynamics of love and friendship and the deep desire to live a life filled with purpose. and it is an excellent choice as a 106 Oprah's Book Club selection.